Today it's time to talk about Hyper-V or Hyper-5, which is a recent shoot 'em up that was released not too long ago, I think 1 month or so. And as you can see, it's a very retro shoot 'em up, kind of similar to like Thunder Force that back in the day in Mega Drive or Genesis, whatever you call it, during the 16-bit era. Of course, everything is in 3D these days, so you can see enemies are rotating, coming from different angles and so on. You have a bunch of weapons that you can customize, so in between levels, you will see it later, you can upgrade whatever you have and add some additional missiles and so on. But the controls are fairly simple. You have about, I think, 2 or 3 buttons that you use to switch between different weapons and different systems you have, and to take care of the enemies that are coming to you. It's a fairly forgiving game. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but you have a health bar, so it's not like you die after a single shot. And of course, it gets harder as you go through, but it's still reasonable in terms of difficulty, and especially as you get to keep your upgrades even after a game over. So progressively you get more and more, I would say, a more and more powerful ship that helps you to go through the more difficult areas. As you can see, you get fairly quickly to bosses and I would say like intermediate enemies that are bigger than usual. And there's also a bunch of cutscenes that make the transition fairly nice. Only problem is like sometimes you'd like to skip the cutscenes, and I think they don't always allow you to skip them. So this makes them a bit redundant when you just died and you'd like to start as soon as possible on the same area, but you have to see this cutscene again. But still, it's fairly nicely done. I really like what they did there with the idea of changing the the view of the action and giving it a more cinematic feel to the action. The first level is fairly easy. You won't die too much. I think I did here, actually. But you can get through it without too much, I say, training. Yeah, I did. And this is here the screen where, in between levels, you can actually upgrade some parts, the shields, I think, the missiles, different aspects. As you can see, it costs some credits, and you get credits after finishing every level. So as you progress, you'll be able to unlock more and more stuff that will make you a bit stronger. You can even like downgrade, so in case you don't have enough credit, you can downgrade an existing weapon and to enable the purchase of a different type or different more expensive weapon too. So it's very flexible. You're not stuck into the upgrades you made before, which just makes sense because you probably don't want that in case you made the wrong choice. As you can see, the levels don't always take place in space. Second level here is on a planet with a lake, which is fairly nice visuals. By the way, the game runs in Proton, and as you can see, it runs perfectly. There's virtually no problem running that game without a Linux client. So I would definitely encourage you to, if you like this kind of shoot 'em up, to try out that game. It won't be an issue on Linux. and there's a lot of enemy variety. You can see like there's very few, I would say, reuse of the same kind of enemies the whole time. You can see now there's like floating mines. Now you have like this kind of mech that's trying to shoot at you while you're there. It's very well done. I think one of the main issues I have with the game is that sometimes there's debris floating around when you destroy some enemies, and it's hard to know whether some things are in the background or in the foreground and whether you actually could hit them or not. So that's the only, I would say, problem I have with this game. Is sometimes you get a bit confused visually as to what can hit you, what cannot hit you, and it's kind of becomes a trial and error to understand, like, okay, this is actually okay, this is not okay, and finally you get to pass certain areas by finding out what was potentially an obstacle or something you could not mess with. The game is also fairly inventive in terms of changing the viewpoint. You will see there after a short time, it will rotate the view from the side scroller to a top view scroller in a very smooth way. This is actually very interesting. I mean, this is not the first game that does that, obviously, but still, I think they do it very well, and yeah, and visually even the enemies are, I think, fairly well done, well animated. There's definitely I would say, high level of production that went to this game. There's a lot of shooters nowadays that just do a lot of sprite reuse, or it's kind of generic kind of enemies. This is not this kind of game. There's definitely a lot of work that went into making the enemies kind of unique, or at least very, I would say, they have their own style, I would say. So it's very pleasant to look at and to go through it. This is what I talked about earlier. The game is like starting to rotate into a top view scroll now. And then you can actually change direction between two paths here, depending on where you are located at some point, and then we'll branch out. This is where, for me, this is a bit difficult to understand, like, can you actually touch the mountain? Can you actually touch some of the background or not? It's not always clear until you try it. But still, I would say that's a minor issue, and you get used to it. So yep, I would say check it out, and hopefully you like it as much as I did, and get prepared to die a lot.